Good morning, everybody. It is 9:02 on February 1st, 2021. We are here for a public hearing on proposed administrative rules. We will be having a public hearing for proposed administrative rules, chapters 1153, 1154, 1155, and 1156. Overseeing this hearing will be our Department of Health Hearings Officer, Mr. Steve Jacobson. Mr. Jacobson, can you please provide information on the basic agenda?
There's going to be just some opening remarks and housekeeping things, and a general overview of what the public hearing is going to consist of. And Robert Fan is going to be doing that. Then we're going to have oral testimony in the order that you see on the screen on proposed HAR 1153, 1154, 1155, and 1156. And then the hearing will be closed after that. The information as to the time to submit comments will be provided 2 or 3 times to make sure everyone has that information. Okay, next slide, and we're going to go to Robert Fan. Okay. Oh, okay.
Good morning. My name is Robert Fan, and I'm an environmental health specialist working at the Clean Water Branch. First, I'll go over a few housekeeping rules. Next, I'll give a brief description of the proposed amendments to Chapter 1154 and 1155, and also the new proposed rules for Chapters 1153 and 1156 of the Hawaii Administrative Rules. Last, Mr. Jacobson, the hearing officer, will take public comments for each chapter, starting with Chapter 1153 of the Hawaii Administrative Rules. Here are some housekeeping rules. If you hear an echo, close all browser windows except the Zoom webinar window. If you're simultaneously using the phone call-in feature, mute your computer speakers. If you intend to provide comments, please raise your virtual hand. On a computer, press the raise hand button to raise your virtual hand. On a phone, press *9 on the keypad to raise your virtual hand. Note that all attendees are muted until they are called to give comments. Please wait for the hearing officer to call your name or phone number. On a computer, press the unmute button when prompted. On a phone, press *6 on the keypad to unmute yourself when prompted. Before providing comments, please state your name and affiliation. Note that your virtual hand will be lowered once you are called to provide comments. If you have questions, note that the purpose of this public hearing is to collect comments about the proposed changes to Chapter 1153 through 1156 of the Hawaii Administrative Rules. The Clean Water Branch will not be answering any questions, either written or oral, at this public hearing. The Clean Water Branch will respond to all comments and questions when a final determination will be made on the proposed amendments and the proposed new rules. Next, please. The Department of Health proposes to amend water quality standards as specified in Chapter 1154 and to adopt new or revised numeric standards for toxic pollutants consistent with the EPA's 2015 final updated human health ambient water quality criteria or earlier recommendations from the EPA. The proposed numeric standards reflect the latest scientific information and criteria from the EPA for the protection of human health from the risks associated with fish consumption. The proposed amendments to Chapter 1154 include, but are not limited to, updating numeric standards for 70 existing toxic pollutants, adding 40 new toxic pollutants, updating names of toxic pollutants for consistency with the EPA, adding chemical abstract service or CAS numbers for most toxic pollutants, adding regulatory flexibility such as the assignment of appropriate uses to water bodies based on the conduct of use attainability analysis, the administration of water quality standards variances, and the derivation of proper site-specific water quality criteria. Removing the requirements for water quality certification and placing them in the new Chapter 1153, removing certain requirements for National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permits and placing them in existing Chapter 1155. Next, please. The Department of Health proposes to remove Section 401 Water Quality Certification, or WQC requirements that are specified in Section 9.1 of Chapter 1154, and to create a new Chapter 1153 that incorporates substance of the existing Section 401 WQC requirements. The Department of Health is authorized by the EPA to grant, deny, or waive WQCs, whereas the Department of Health must obtain the approval of the EPA to adopt or revise water quality standards. Therefore, WQC requirements do not belong in Chapter 1154. The Department of Health also proposes revisions intended to streamline, clarify, and codify the WQC application process. The proposed requirements include, but are not limited to, revising WQC application requirements to match federal regulations, eliminating filing fees for applications based on standard operating procedures pre-approved by the Department of Health, establishing a 60 calendar day deadline for the Department of Health to act on a complete application, simplifying WQC applications for traditional Hawaiian fish pond projects, codifying conditions and pollution control requirements, codifying circumstances when a WQC can be modified, clarifying that the Department of Health can waive or not require a WQC, proposing requirements to handle after the fact activities. Next slide, please. The Department of Health proposes to revise certain sections of water pollution control as specified in Chapter 1155. The proposed amendments to Chapter 1155 include, but are not limited to, adding federal municipal separate storm sewer system, or MS4, waiver provisions, changing deadlines to submit renewal permit applications from 180 days prior to permit expiration to 1 calendar year, clarifying that procedures for public notice and public hearing need only to comply with Section 1-28.5 of Hawaii Revised Statutes, limiting public hearing comments to written comments, authorizing the Department of Health to deny new and/or renewal permits to dischargers who violate permit conditions, clarifying that automatic notice of general permit coverage does not extend to MS4 general permits, providing for automatic termination of administrative extensions for projects and activities covered under general permits, and incorporating the requirements for zones of mixing and intake credit requirements from Chapter 1154. Next slide, please. As authorized by Section 342E-3A2 of Hawaii Revised Statutes, the Department of Health proposes new administrative rules in Chapter 1156 to protect state waters from non-point sources of pollution. The proposed requirements include, but are not limited to, providing frameworks for the prevention, abatement, and control of new and existing non-point sources of pollution, targeting non-point sources of pollution from activities conducted by state agencies, identifying known non-point sources of water pollution, requiring registration, development of a water pollution prevention plan, and implementation of management measures to prevent and abate non-point sources of pollution. Next slide, please. The proposed amendments and proposed new rules, along with detailed fact sheets, are available at the Clean Water Branch public notice website. Written comments must be received by 4:30 p.m. this afternoon. You can either email them or drop them off at the contact information shown below. For attendees joining by phone, please call the Clean Water Branch office at 808-586-4309. Once again, that phone number is 808-586-4309 for contact information. This concludes my presentation. I will now hand the hearing back to Mr. Jacobson, the hearing officer, who will call on interested attendees wishing to provide comments on the proposed changes to Chapter 1153 through 1156 of the Hawaii Administrative Rules. Thank you.
I don't see anybody.
Yeah, so we should answer that question. Whether you can answer it, yeah, there'll be no extensions to submit.
Okay, there is, before we get, this is Mr. Jacobson. Before we get started with that, there is one question. Will there be an extension to submit comments? And the answer to that from the staff folks here is no, there will not be. Is there anyone who wishes to submit testimony? Okay, Ms. Antolini, please go ahead.
Aloha, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Good morning. Aloha. My name is Denise Antolini. I am the president of a North Shore nonprofit called Ma'alama Pupukea Waimea. Our primary mission is to protect the water quality and the marine environment at the Pupukea Marine Life Conservation District, which is Class AA waters. So I will keep my testimony short. We submitted written testimony, and I believe, Mr. Jacobson, you want to take it section by section. So I will comment right now just on 1153. We are in support, and in particular, we appreciate the fact that the section is being moved for streamlining and clarity, and particularly support the streamlined process for local IA, and also the public participation requirements and the strengthening of the Department of Health's enforcement authority. So I will end there for now on 1153 with much appreciation to Department of Health for moving this along. Mahalo.
Mahalo. Thank you very much for your testimony. Is there anyone else? I don't see anyone else, and I don't have an indication of anyone else who wishes to testify on. No, don't see any. On section 53. Okay, let's go next to section 1154. Is there anyone who wishes to testify in section 1154? Okay, I don't see anyone. How about section 11? Oh,
I think that Ms. Antolini is going to give, she was just holding off. She's going section per section as we had.
yeah, I understand. Okay, now she, okay, Ms. Antolini, is that for 1154?
No, I'll wait for 1155. I just want to clarify. Thank you for
Okay.
mentioning that. I'll wait. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we're at 1155, so please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. I will reintroduce myself on this section as Denise Antolini, president of Ma'alama Pupukea on the North Shore. Again, we submitted written testimony. I wanted to point out in our written testimony, we do oppose the elimination of the oral testimony option on 1155.13 subsection D. We've explained in our written comments the importance, particularly in Hawaii, of providing for oral testimony opportunity. And I would urge DOH to rethink this in terms of its environmental justice implications, but also because we've learned a lot through COVID, been forced to learn a lot about other ways to communicate between the public and agencies. And there are ways to provide oral submissions that are asynchronous or synchronous that would not be as burdensome as the traditional public hearing. So I would urge Department of Health to reconsider this rule. We have a specific amendment proposed that we hope would be not so burdensome. And in general, we support the comments. Again, our primary theme of our comments is supporting DOH modernizing the rules, strengthening enforcement, increasing transparency, and continuing to support public participation. So with that, thank you for that, and I'll close my comments on 1155.
Is there any, thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak as to 1155? Seeing no one, 1156. I don't see anyone on 11. Okay, Ms. Antolini on 1156.
Mahalo. Just for the record, I'll do it again.
We will remember.
Thank you. So well, let me just get right to 1156 then, with your indulgence. Thank you so much. This, I do want to comment for just within my time limit on the importance of 1156. This is a huge step forward. There was a mistake in my testimony. I said 40 years after the enactment of the Clean Water Act. It's 50 years. And it's about time. And so I commend the Department of Health for moving forward this extremely important amendment to the rules in order to implement very fundamental non-point source pollution framework and requirements. It's long overdue, and I also really appreciate the approach, which is starting with the major landowners, including public landowners, and really trying to set in place a system that gets a handle on what is considered to be the most important source of terrestrial pollution. We certainly, bring it back to the Marine Life Conservation District, we certainly experience a lot of non-point source pollution. We're not as urban, of course, as Honolulu, which has even more issues, but this has a direct impact and should result in significant water quality gains. And we just note, as we stated in our testimony, that it enhances the state's 30 by 30 initiative, as well as the public trust doctrine and the responsibility to a clean and healthy environment under the Constitution. We do have 3 quick recommendations. It's on page 4 of our testimony. Let me mention them and then I'll conclude. We encourage under 1156, 06, and 07, web access, more broad web access to materials to avoid the kind of old-fashioned having to request, inspect, copy. And I know that typically agencies are very cooperative with providing materials, but it would be nice to modernize the access consistent with 92F. We also recommend enhanced penalties for repeat violators in egregious situations. We've had some experience with that up here. And also for field citation settlements, we really recommend there be a clear guideline that it be not less than, and we recommend 30%. There are issues with too much discretion for settlement in the field, in our view, and we would hope that DOH would strengthen that. Let me conclude again by congratulating the Department of Health on moving this forward. It's really significant, and we're very optimistic that it will pass. Mahalo for the opportunity to testify this morning.
Mahalo for your testimonies. Is there anyone else who wishes to say anything? We'll give you a few seconds to raise your hand. whatever the mechanism is. We're not seeing anybody. Will a name pop up if they're?
No, these are all the attendees, Steve.
Yeah, yeah,
So
okay.
only the hand will go up if the full Steve.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah. Benalale.
Okay, Lay, please. You may go ahead. Ms. Lay? Can you unmute, please?
So she's unmuted. She's unmuted, Steve.
She is unmuted.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Maybe she's having a slight difficulty. We should just let her resolve her.
Yes, Ms. Lay, you may speak at any time. We're going to give you, it looks like there may be a technical difficulty. Oh, okay, now we're seeing a.
Yeah, so she muted herself. She has to unmute herself. As I said, she might have.
Hello? Could, Ms. Lay, could you please call in? Apparently we're getting some, okay. Yes, you can. Yes, you can call back in.
Yeah, it looks like her connection. Let me see where she is. It's in alphabetical order. So yeah, I think she got disconnected.
Okay, it appears that Ms. Lay got disconnected, so we're going to give her.
Yeah, so as you can see, alphabetically, she's, no longer shown in the attendees list.
Okay.
And so we're going to just wait for her to get back on. If not, then she can call in, as we suggested.
Okay. Did we just see another extra phone number pop up there?
Yeah, so could be a phone number also, we don't know.
Okay. Are there any other commenters other than Ms. Lay? Okay, we'll just hold for a minute here. Well, and let's see. Start the screen.
I'm not sure where the.
I have I have a phone number for her,
Yes.
but it's not complete. It's 22151, and then.
So yes, 221. Let's see if we can find the 221. It's 808 and then 808 221 is what we're looking for.
Well, maybe.
There she is. Yes. So she is calling in. So it's
Okay.
yeah. And
Oh,
then
okay.
Here she's gonna. Yeah, she probably has to raise her hand and unmute herself with the phone, which takes a bit more.
Good morning.
Good morning, Ms. Lay.
Thanks for waiting for me. I apologize about the Zoom difficulties. I haven't had that happen before.
I haven't either, and this is about the fourth or fifth one of these that I've done. So anyway, you're here. So
Okay, great. Thank you.
We've accomplished that. Please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Lena Alale. I'm an attorney with Earth Justice, and I am commenting in support of the rules, I'd like to thank the Clean Water Branch and specifically Matt Carano for outreaching to the community in advance and hosting some talk story sessions to get the information about this out, and also the department for preparing the rationale document that gave some of the background thinking and the behind the rules. And while Earth Justice is in support of the program to regulate non-point source pollution, we do have a number of concerns with the program design that could limit its effectiveness. The first and major concern is that the rules as written apply only to publicly owned property and not to privately owned property. As we all know, there's a large concentration in Hawaii of agricultural lands and private ownership. And in addition to there being no reasoning provided by the Clean Water Branch for exempting private property, it presents a missed opportunity. There's a lot of large landowners who operate farming or commercial forestry on parcels of land that span both public and private property. So while the owner may have already prepared a water pollution plan for that portion of the property that is publicly owned, that would not apply to privately owned property, despite the fact that the farm is operated as a single unit. And that's just really a missed opportunity in terms of regulation and reducing runoff. So our first recommendation is that the department extend the rules so that they apply to private and public property equally. Another concern with the size is the size limit. That's a second restriction on applicability of the rules to parcels that are 1,000 acres or larger in size. And again, that is the way the rules are written. Two adjacent parcels that are both publicly owned, but by different agencies, for example, Department of Ag and Department of Land and Natural Resources, even if they are leased to the same common farm or forestry operator, if one of the parcels is smaller than 1,000 acres, it would not qualify for regulation, even if it's operated as part of a single farm that's much larger than 1,000 acres because of the separate ownership between the two different agencies. And again, not only does this complicate the implementation of the program for the department to have to try and figure out who owns which parcels and what size, it's a missed opportunity because again, for example, a seed corporation could have both of these adjacent lands and only one of the two would be subject to regulation because of the size limitation, and this just doesn't seem to make any sense. It's just, again, a missed opportunity.
Okay, Ms. Lay, you're already over the 3 minute, the maximum that was set. How much more?
Okay.
How much more do you have?
I'll wrap up. Our main suggestion with respect to the size limitation is to reduce it from the current 1,000 acres to 50 acres. This would cover the majority of farmland that is in cultivation. So it would apply to, it would cover a greater portion of the land that's resulting in runoff. And also for farms smaller than 50 acres, we suggest that there be a standard water pollution control plan, much like a general NPDES permit that would apply to those small farms. So there would be no need for an individualized assessment and review by the department, but it would just be a set of best management practices that those smaller farms could implement to reduce runoff. And again, this would reduce kind of the whole regulatory burden of having to go through the individualized planning process, but it would allow for immediate on the ground reduction by implementation of those best management practices. So again, thank you. We support the rules and suggest those 2 amendments to extend them to private property and to reduce the size threshold from 1,000 acres to 50 acres.
Okay, thank you very much for your testimony. I presume you've covered everything else in your written testimony?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Thank you all for attending the public hearing and providing your testimony today. Again, this afternoon is at 4:30. Was it?
I could give that information after you're done.
Okay. Why don't you repeat that in? Oh, wait a minute. It is. I'm sorry. It is here. Okay. Here you go.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. Here.
Yeah. So once again, the proposed amendments and proposed new rules, along with detailed fact sheets, are available at the Clean Water Branch public website. Written comments must be received by 4:30 this afternoon. You can either email them or drop them off at the contact information shown below. For attendees joining by phone, please call the Clean Water Branch office at 808-586-4309. Once again, 808-586-4309 for contact information. Thank you.
That will conclude the hearing. Thank you very much for attending. We are signing off now. Thank you.